rougher every week. Well, this is a special edition of In the Library of Graphic Literature with my special guest, Dennis Osbourne.
Hello.
We're here to talk about comics and the differences between when I grew up reading comics, which would be in 60s and 70s, and when Dennis grew up reading comics, which was late 80s,
late early 90s, in that era, so, which are two totally different, different eras, so.
Yeah, it was Dennis who came up with this idea, and when he mentioned it, it was like, Jesus, that's a cool idea. I'm sure there are some people out there who'd be interested in this type of thing, right?
Well, right now, a lot of the readers now...
I think I gotta spin the rack first for good luck. Okay, go ahead.
That are getting into comics, they're an entire different generation from myself. Which, collecting, when I grew up collecting, it doesn't seem like that long ago.
No.
But now when you realize that your collection, the way you collect it, is an outdated way now, it's remarkable when you think about it in that way. It doesn't seem like that long ago.
Yeah.
But when you think it's been 25 years, I think since the Spider-Man animated series debuted in 1994.
Oh, I don't even like to think about it
So
anymore.
25 years as a cartoon that I grew up and was beloved.
Yeah.
You gotta put things into perspective, so I thought it would be fun.
Yeah, it's 50-something years since the Spider-Man one I was watching, right?
Which I still watch. So.
Well, yeah, well, in terms of comics, like myself in the 60s, late 60s and into the 70s, the comics, of course, they were all newsstand comics. There was no comic book stores here in Newfoundland at all. So each comic book day, and the distribution was spotty. So sometimes if you were collecting X-Men and Fantastic Four and a bunch of them, they might not all show up at your one drugstore. So we used to have to go. Myself, I'd do the rounds and same with other collectors from a couple of different drugstores just to make sure that you got every single one of them. And sometimes they might all be missing something, and you get screwed in the end. So you got all your X-Men right up to a stop, and then missing one, and it continues on. And
there was no back issue market really back then, and no one collect them and resell them or anything like this. That didn't exist, so.
No, and at least here in Newfoundland, our first one was the Escape Hatch, and which started as Words of Music across from where that Tim's is on Harvey Road up there. Then they moved up to the corner. I think it was like around 76 or I was 15, 16 anyway. And of course, soon as and I worked a job with my grandfather at his grocery store, so I had lots of cash and. When I discovered that, it was just, I mean, I was buying Silver Age stuff for $4 and $5, Thor's by Kirby and stuff like that. And exactly what you say, next thing that's when I discovered the whole Fourth World, because he had all of them just about. It was just like, oh, I can remember reading some of these when I was a kid. It was like, oh, I gotta buy all of these, right? And, but in terms of merchandise and stuff like that, it was crickets. I mean, the only thing I can remember is the Captain Action, and he came with other outfits like for Superman, Captain America, whatever, and they were fairly accurate actually, and the Batman car itself and some of the attendant vehicles and all that, they were about the closest that I can remember in terms of merchandising for anything when I was growing up. There was virtually nothing out there, right? And what was out there, if you did find it, it was like some kind of crappy knockoff with Superman in a purple suit or something like that. Now, you had the Mego figures. Right. But, I mean, they were kind of chunky. I mean, they were better than anything else back then. But I mean, it was basically into the 80s, until your generation, that the marketing, well, they finally clued in that they could make all kinds of money off this stuff, right?
Pretty much started with the Superpowers line. From what, 86, 87, around there. That's when he started to get then the full line assortments and mass marketing, because they did the cartoon. Tied in with Super Friends, they did Galactic Guardians and Superpowers team, and they tied all that in. So that was the start of it. So
I can remember that. And then well, geez, and well, I mean, I know of some of it because of having the comic book store around the same time that you were collecting. And I mean, I was shocked at, my God, I can get all these action figures, and they're all fairly accurate and all that. And like, I can remember the Magneto, I thought was really cool because his helmet came off.
Off. There was a Tony Stark. You could put the Iron Man armor actually on him.
Yes,
now, just the front part, and the back it was just Tony in a metal suit that didn't really tie in there, right? But it was a start.
Yeah.
Right? Now you can actually fully do everything with figures now, so.
I mean, compared to, like I say, to the toys of... I mean, we had other great toys and all that, but geez, it was... And as a comic book fan, too, I'd always be like, where's the cool superhero toys, right? It just never made sense to me, right?
For a market that was for kids at the time, growing up, to have nothing for them to play with or imagine playing with or anything like this, besides coloring books and other little magazines and everything.
Yeah. Or cutting up the comics to play with them,
right? Little cardboard cutouts, so they just didn't exist.
Yeah.
So.
But I mean, geez, you were lucky to have grown up, because I mean, just I can remember what I had at the store in terms of merchandise and stuff like that. That was really the start of it. Because I mean, even into the 80s, there wasn't much, and it was, like you say, into the mid and late 80s that it really started to... Well, also, too, with the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, I think, had something to do with that, because when they came out without their action figures, it just went insane.
They exploded, and they had hundreds and hundreds of figures, every possible manner you could think of, and theme and everything.
Yeah.
And they flooded the market with it, and it worked for a while, and I guess Marvel, which I think at the time owned Toy Biz, they kind of caught on to it with their Marvel Superheroes line, but I think when it really took off with the X-Men line, which I'll talk about later.
Yeah.
And then after Superpowers, and then Toy Biz took over the Batman movie figures from '89. When Kenner took over with the Batman animated series, it was the same thing.
Yeah.
Put out 2 or 3 Batman figures, so every kid could have a Batman. You toss in a villain, you flood the market with Batman figures.
Yeah.
And that's what they did, so.
Yeah, and the Simpsons too. There was a nice run of Simpsons
toys
figures there in the late '90s and that too, right? But yeah, like I say, it was a desert in terms of cool toys and all that. I would have bought like Mr. Shakespeare there at the bank, and I would have bought everything. I would have bought a mother box for sure, right?
Yeah, if it was all available.
But yeah, I think they really missed out, right?
Yeah.
But now, as opposed to me, like I say, having to do the search and peck for comics, you're lucky that you had to one-stop sort of type of shop rather than having to go everywhere, looking for everything, right?
Well, even if you were missing a couple issues, even without newsstand, you had 2 or 3 comic shops around.
Yeah.
Sports memorabilia stores sold comic books in the 90s.
Yeah. Not very well either.
No. Collecting card shops sold.
Yeah.
Every business sold comic books. It was a form of revenue. Convenience stores.
Yeah.
So you could do comic book rounds, and you hit all your comic book stores, which started to build up a back issue market, a heavy back issue market.
Yeah.
And you could search for what you wanted that way.
Yeah.
And this was before eBay, which is far easier. You can buy anything you ever wanted now.
Yeah. Well, when I had my store, that was just a few years before eBay. But I mean, I had my childhood collection that I used as back issues, and I had quite the collection. Right? It was stacked with Kirby, Neil Adams, all the best stuff going back to the early '60s, and it took about 3 or 4 years to sell it all too. But I sold every bit of it in the end, right? And it was that's when I got into the hardcovers and collections, because now that my childhood collection was gone, it was just like, oh my God, what comics do I read? My comics are all gone, right? But I had left over when I closed the store. I had a few Masterworks left over.
Which started.
Yeah, and
started everything.
And I was just like, geez, maybe I'll collect these instead, and maybe someday I might have, my old collection back and all that.
Yeah.
Not realizing that 25 years later I'll be overrun with it, right?
Now, you were talking about the hardcovers and paperbacks in the 90s. Like an example here, no one really wanted them. So this here was the original Spider-Man Carnage trade paperback from the 90s that I bought back in the day. And you hated to buy the paperback, because growing up, you always wanted the original issues. And you see them on the wall, and they'll be $10 or $12, and you go buy this one for $6.95 US, $8.70 Canadian. But you hated to have to go out and buy this.
Yeah.
Because kids back then, they wanted the single issues.
The original one,
And now, it's the people my age that still want the single issues, and the younger readers want the paperbacks.
Yeah.
Because they look nice on a shelf and they stand out. And
yeah. I think the first I came across getting any kind of soft covers outside of a few heavy metal ones and all that in the late 70s was, I think it was the Turtle books, when they, because it was hard to get the first few because, you know, low print runs and all that. So I think it was First Comics came out with the, and they were colored too instead of black and white, and that was those were some of the first ones I can remember buying like that. You know, outside of you know, like the Marvel graphic novels line and stuff like that, right?
But even in the early, say, mid-90s, you can get the Carnage one, you can get the early Venom issues in paperback. It was normally books like Secret Wars, Watchmen, Dark Knight Returns, Year One.
Yeah.
And they were constantly in print. But those were the only paperbacks that you could collect.
Yeah.
For the most part. Yeah. You see some other random ones come out, but they go out of print really quick and you never see them again.
Yeah. And, but with when the the Masterworks came along, no, although that was a little bit earlier.
So, well, after the Spectator market.
Yeah.
In the late 90s, when that killed the comic industry.
Yeah.
And they
tried to.
They tried to. And they tried to find a way to get into bookstores.
Yeah.
And they went that market. It saved the industry, really.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you're getting two people now. You're getting a generation that grew up on the paperbacks. You're getting my generation that grew up still wanting and looking for those single issues.
Yeah. Yeah. And me who grew up totally on the single issues, right?
And I grew up back then. I still do it now on the weekends, or you still do your little back issue rounds. You check out the back issues, new arrivals, and you're still searching for...
Yeah. And that's part of the fun of it all, right?
I always said, issues, say, new Fourth World.
Yeah.
Issues like that. They're really nice to have, and to me, they're historical, but they're not sentimental.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I don't have that aspect, but if I went through and I end up finding a bunch of Age of Apocalypse X-Men issues from 1995, I got excited for those, because those are comics that growing up I could never have.
Yeah, yeah. And same with the Fourth World for me. Because when I got into my teens and late teens, I went mad trying to get, and it took me until, geez, I think the final one I ever got, because I thought I had a complete collection when I was in New York in the mid-'80s, and I was at Forbidden Planet at the time, going through the Forever People, and just looking at it just for something to do as I was just browsing their downstairs collection. I came across this one, Forever People, and I was looking at it, I was like, what the hell is this? And so I pulled out my wallet and my little list, which I had at the time, and went down, and sure enough, it was just, oh my God, I do have all of them, except for this one. I was just like, yes. It was fairly cheap, too, at the time.
I remember going through, this was maybe last year, going through the back issue bins I was looking, and I had my piece of paper there. Yeah. Just the issues I was missing wrote down. And there was a younger person, I remember around 20, looking through the back issues next to me, and he looked at the paper and he's like, "Oh, rocking it old school," and that just dates you right away. Right?
Yeah.
I was like, "Well, I could have put it on my phone, but I had to print it off."
Yeah.
So
well, the list is good because what if you leave your phone behind or whatever? Yeah. I'd always have the list in the wallet.
In the wallet.
And that never fails, right? And I mean, it'd be one folded up several times and jammed into one corner.
And penned off, and issues you end up finding. Yeah. So.
Yeah, and that's part of the fun of it, actually, I think, is the list, right? That's, but yeah, that's one thing, you're right, that they don't do today,
right. And a lot of newer collectors now, that are buying the graphic novels, it's the thrill of looking for certain issues.
Yeah.
I remember it was an issue of Robin, because I read Robin from just about issue 1 right up until New 52 ruined it.
Okay.
And I was always missing issue 49, I think.
Okay.
Just a random issue. And every week I check the comic shops, you go through the back issues, you check, and...
Yeah, you do the hunt.
You do the hunt constantly. And when eBay started to get popular and some of the online stores, I just went online, I bought it for $2, a couple of bucks shipping, but I got it. And then that aspect was done.
Yeah.
It wasn't as fun. I was holding it, but it felt like you were almost cheating.
Yeah, I was going to say exactly that.
You just hit a buy it now button and you got it in 2 weeks.
Yeah, there's no fun No, I agree with you. I like the hunt part of it, because it's like when I was living down in New York and going through I mean, I spent most of my time in the artist alley talking to people, but the last day I'd wander out into the section and be looking for the odd book here and there, and like I scored the Eternals omnibus. And
first ever omnibus I ever bought.
Oh, go away.
Yeah.
And the Devil Dinosaur.
Which I never bought.
For $25 each. Wish I'd bought two of them now.
Yeah. No, I know, and I never knew what drew me to the Eternals omnibus. I've never seen it in the previous catalog, never bought them before.
Yeah.
It was a $125 hardcover.
Yeah.
Back in around 2006, 2007.
Yeah.
If not earlier than that. And for some reason, I just folded the page, put it on for pre-order, and when it came in, I bought it right away. And I think it was the first Kirby book I've ever bought. Definitely my first omnibus.
Okay.
But that was my introduction to actually owning something belonging to Kirby.
Oh, okay.
And then, 12, 13 years later, I have 130 Marvel omnibus. So it worked. So
yeah, and the Eternals, I was a Kirby fan, so when he went back to Marvel, I collected all of the Eternals. So I had them all in singles and stuff like that, and all the 2001 and everything he was doing I bought at that time, right? I still even have a set of 2001 Space Odysseys that I'll get bound sooner or later. It's just too bad that big one.
Yeah.
The original one, which I do have, that one is just too big to fit into. Now, what else did you have there too?
I got some goodies. So, I always said that when I started collecting, I don't know if I was brainwashed into liking certain things, but growing up early 90s, you're kind of a product of mass media blitzing.
Yeah.
And I remember specifically a couple of instances. I ended up buying one of the first comics I vividly actually using my own money to buy. It was like Spider-Man 46, and it starred the Hobgoblin.
Okay, yeah.
And Hobgoblin's still one of my favorite villains of all time. And I'm pretty sure it's because they told me that he should be my favorite villain of all time. So, you buy the comic book, and inside the comic book, there was an ad here. Well, first it came with a free animated cell.
Oh, wow.
So...
Now, is it a real animated cell from the...
No, it was kind of based off it. I think maybe like preliminary or something. But...
Still pretty cool.
It had a little booklet inside of the upcoming animated series in 1994.
Oh, okay.
So, you buy the comic book starring Hobgoblin.
And then you get...
And then you go, tell you to watch the series. You go to watch the series. And who's in the first season? Hobgoblin.
Oh, okay.
And then you go to the toy stores. First wave of Spider-Man figures is out. Hobgoblin's in it.
Boom.
So that's how they were getting kids through every market, through comic books.
Yeah.
They were getting them through TV. They were getting them through action figures.
Actually, come to think of it, there was the Captain Action comic book.
There you go.
Now that you mentioned, that's about the earliest and probably the only example I can think of from when I was growing up. 'Cause just as you were saying that, I was just like, oh my God, actually there was a Captain Captain Action comic, right?
So,
but not on this scale.
No, and so that's mass market.
Yeah.
There were obviously the video games.
Yeah.
So in 1994, you had Spider-Man Unlimited #1, starting the Maximum Carnage storyline. In 1994, you had the video game debut.
Yeah.
Based off solely straight out of the comic book.
Yeah.
Then they released the action figures. And so this is my original childhood one. So Carnage and Venom were in the very first wave of Spider-Man action figures. Venom debuted in season 1. Carnage didn't debut until season 4, maybe season 5. So several years down the road.
Yeah.
So you're like, well, why would they toss Carnage into the first assortment? Well, because he was tying into the comic book that was getting released at the time. He was tying into the brand new video game. So they were getting kids through the entire market.
Yeah.
Which was genius.
They really wasted our time back when we were kids. They could have been pumped up. Because I would have bought all this stuff if it was coming out in my generation, for sure. Right?
And they were flooding the market. And one of the main reasons was because Marvel owned Toy Biz.
Yeah.
Part of Toy Biz. And then when they end up going... declaring Chapter 11, I think Toy Biz ended up buying Marvel and rebranding and some weird complicated mess. Well, we got a couple other things.
Oh, yes, I remember
So what we were talking about,
yeah.
Uncanny X-Men figures. This is the original Gambit.
Yeah.
This is my childhood one. I bought this one secondhand.
I can remember selling those, you know.
Right? So when we were talking about Ninja Turtles,
yeah,
and just flooding the market, Series 1, Wolverine, Storm, Archangel, Nightcrawler, Cyclops, Colossus.
Yeah.
3 villains. But in the second wave, just the second wave of a relatively new line, you had Weapon X, Forge, Iceman, Wolverine, Gambit, Banshee, Wolverine again, Sabretooth, a second Magneto, Mr. Sinister, right? Sauron.
Yeah.
So they were flooding the market because the animated series was debuting around 92, and you were flooding the market with everything that way.
Yeah. Oh, I can remember selling all these.
It sold all of them. I owned every figure from the second assortment.
Yeah.
So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 12 figures.
Yeah.
The entire line I bought.
Yeah.
Because of the animated series.
Yeah. Yeah, that must have been why. I was wondering why I was selling so many at the time, right?
And the animated series, they had sticker books, which we grew up. I remember going to Scholastic book fairs, and they had children's novels.
Yeah.
Of several story arcs. One was the Giant Size X-Men #1 reprint, telling that, and one was a kids' version of the Weapon X storyline.
Okay, yeah.
So you're growing up 7, 8 years old, and you're reading a story about Wolverine getting kidnapped and brainwashed and used as a weapon.
Yeah, and filled with metal. And
filled with metal and everything like that. So.
Oh, show the. I was going to say.
So the cards.
It leads perfectly into this.
So.
Oh, I can remember.
Superhero trading cards. This was from the first assortment in 1990.
Yeah. I can remember dealing in these, especially the holograms and all that.
Holograms on the back.
And this was back when they didn't know the thing about putting in by putting in the extra card, it made it a little bit thicker.
Yeah.
So you could actually go into another store, corner store, and just feel them and go through them, and you could actually pick the holograms right out of the deck, right? And
trading cards were a huge market at the time.
Oh yeah, I sold a lot myself, right?
And being in school, and every kid had these just as frequent as hockey cards.
Oh yeah.
And you would trade certain ones, and you build up the sets.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I did really good myself on these. And
there was multiple Marvel ones. Spider-Man had his own series.
Yeah.
There were multiple X-Men ones and everything like this.
And who was it? Wizard used to have really cool exclusive ones in like gold ones and stuff like that. If you order 25, here we go. If you order 25 of them as a store owner, that's when you'd get that.
You get that special card.
And it was just. Now I used to give it to Chris, my employee, because he was a kid at the time, and he used to be watching the store for me, and it was just like I wasn't that interested in it, so he wanted them really bad. It was just like, okay.
And Wizard magazine was a big part of the 90s.
God, I sold so many of those.
This was how you got all your news.
Yeah.
Wizard was how I learned a lot about artists and writers, because you had the top 10 writers and artists list.
Yeah.
They were big into the speculator market.
Yeah.
Because they were talking about the top 10 hot comics, and they had the price guides in the back. But it was how I learned about artist changes going through comics, cancellations, relaunches.
Yeah, it was great like that.
It was.
Yeah. I guess when the internet came along, though, and we got more and more sources of information, it slowly started to kill Wizard.
It did.
It was. But yeah, it was kind of fun to me. I liked it because it was a nice fancy magazine for comics, right?
This one is a special edition. This is the original one I had growing up. So it was anniversary of the X-Men, and it broke down history of all the artists, all the writers, the complete history of the X-Men. And this was how I had to learn the history of the X-Men, and then you kind of go from the animated series there, and that's my first interaction with like the Dark Phoenix saga was through the cartoon and everything.
Yeah.
So Wizard was a huge influential part of collecting in the 90s.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I don't care what people said about Wizard. Well, I went to a Wizard World convention. It was pretty good, actually, right, in Chicago. So, but geez, how are we doing for time here? Oh yeah, we're getting close to the end here. Actually, I just noticed that now. Yeah, 25 minutes almost exactly. I've been keeping them to that. You got anything else left?
No, I think I'm out.
That's it. But yeah, so when you came up with this idea about talking about the differences between collecting, my collecting, your collecting, it just hit me. It was just like, this is a super cool idea.
Yeah.
And I was thinking we should even do future ones where bringing in and talking about comics that from both of our eras and all that.
Now, mine were the 90s, so a lot of them are, the greatest.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
A lot of Image comics in there.
Or since then.
All right.
Well, folks, thanks for having us over on this special edition here, and I guess I can... I'll give you a lift on my boom tube there if you want.
Sounds good.
And by the way, the person who came up with the idea for doing this was Dennis. Okay, here we go. Okay, oh my God, can you feel it? Woo!